YouTube, Miller Corner here, welcome back once again and welcome to 500 subscribers. That's right people, we did it. Thanks to you lovely lot subscribing, this idiot making videos about cars for the internet has just hit 500 subscribers and I could not be more grateful for all your help and support. Now as promised, over the last few weeks, you lovely lot have been sending in all your questions on all my various social media for me to answer for the 500 subs special, and since we've hit 500 subs, here it is. So without further ado, I've got my iPhone SE here and I'm going to answer all of your questions. One of the options I gave you for asking questions was through YouTube. If you wanted to ask me a question through your YouTube account, you could have commented on the Subaru WRX seats in the Super Seicento video, and sure enough, I got a few. And the first one is from YouTube user BennyBoy75, who asks, why did you choose your car? Which is a very valid question, and frankly a lot of people ask me that. For those of you that don't know how the insurance system works in the UK, basically if you're under the age of 21, you can't get insured on anything. No chance of a quote for anything even remotely fast or sporty. And of course at the age of 17 as a car enthusiast, all you want is something fast and sporty, but you can't afford to buy one and you certainly can't afford to insure one. Working where I was at the time and not earning a great deal, I didn't have much of a budget to go and buy a really cool car, so I was just sort of looking at the lower end of the budget for 200 or 300 quid, just finding what I could. And I didn't even know about the Seicento at the time, so I was looking at stuff like Renault Clios, Skoda Fabias and Volkswagen Polos, all the kind of typical cheap to insure but boring first cars. Then I found around the corner from my house a neighbour that had a Fiat Seicento Sporting, a bright yellow pre-facelift one, and I just fell in love with it. I thought it looked great, it appeared to drive and handle very well as standard, and because of its small engine, it was very much affordable to insure. So that was what cemented my decision to get a Seicento Sporting. Next up, YouTube user Curtis Shaw asks, do you ever worry about the safety of the Seicento? This is a very valid point, because for those of you that didn't know, in the Euro NCAP crash test, the Seicento scored just 2 out of 5 stars, which frankly can be a little bit worrying. But to be perfectly honest with you, if you look at most other small cars from that era, like a Nissan Micra or a Daihatsu Cure or a VW Polo, no small car from the late 90s scores particularly well for safety anyway. But at the end of the day, I acknowledge the fact that whatever small car you've got is just not going to be as safe as most big cars out there. And finally from YouTube, user Callista asks, any plans for a Seicento engine swap? Now, as I've said, there is definitely going to be more power coming for the Seicento, and in fact, we are very nearly done with the prep for it. I'm still going to keep my cards close to my chest as far as what I'm doing is concerned, but rest assured, it's gonna be awesome. Next up, we move on to Instagram, and first up, my man Paynos asks, who or what inspired you to start a YouTube channel? For years, I've enjoyed presenting and performing things. I was in the drama club at school and I did all that kind of stuff, and I took performing arts as a GCSE. I've always loved performing and presenting things, and I've spent 4 or 5 years doing local radio, so I've had a lot of experience presenting things. The thing is, as I've said on the channel a few times, it's pretty damn hard to get a radio career off the ground. So I thought, what's an obvious, well-known and highly promotable way to show what you can do in terms of presenting and creating content? And YouTube was the obvious answer, particularly because I've got a bit of a history in terms of doing a BTEC in creative media production, with working with cameras and mics and editing and all that kind of stuff. Plus that kind of stuff just generally interests me because I'm a bit weird. There are a few YouTubers that have inspired the way I make my videos. For example, Seen Through Glass, his cinematography and production values are insanely good, and I hope that one day my videos can be as good quality as his. But generally, I like the idea of YouTube, I love presenting, and thanks to all the support from you lovely people, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. Next up, my buddy Tokyo Track Wolf asks, what's something you wouldn't have done if you weren't filming it for YouTube? Which is again a very interesting question, so props to you for that one, mate. Most of the stuff I do, like modifying my car, I was going to have done anyway, and most of the car shows that I've been to, again, I probably would have gone to anyway, even if I wasn't filming them. The best answer I can give for that, I think, is some of the stuff that I've gone further afield for. For example, if you saw last Friday's video, I travelled to Stratton Motor Company in Norfolk to learn a little bit more about Lotus. Prior to hearing about it from JM on Cars, I didn't even know that Stratton existed, and I probably wouldn't have driven 200 miles just to have a look round. So as much as there isn't one specific answer I can give there, I think the best answer I can give is I probably wouldn't have travelled quite so far afield for some of the car shows that I've been to. That said, I do not regret it. Tom Ridley 1905 asks, how did you find your Seicento? Which is a very good question because there's not that many of them around. When I decided that I wanted one, I was looking around in all the usual places, eBay, Gumtree and the Facebook classifieds, but for a few days I just couldn't find a good one within budget, so I was kind of demoralised. But then my dad was on Gumtree looking for Seicentos for me, found the one that I ended up having, went to see it, it was perfect, and the rest is history. Next up, Car Obsession asks, what attracted you to your Fiat? And I guess I've kind of answered this one already, but to reiterate, looks great, handles well, fun to drive, very economical, and super cheap to buy, run and insure. And as a 17, 18, 19-year-old car enthusiast, those are all of the boxes ticked. And frankly, I don't know of any car for the money that would do all those things just as well. MK_Sem14 asks, would you ever buy a K11 Nissan Micra? And if so, what would you do to it? To be perfectly honest with you, I think I would. I really like the Nissan Micra, particularly the earlier ones, and with a few simple mods, they're a really cool looking car as well. I guess if I were to own one, I'd go more down the JDM route, so I'd slam it, I'd maybe get some banded steels on it, and I think I'd probably do some weird kind of art deco and vinyl designs on it to make it different. It is a very similar car to the Super Seicento, but I think I'd modify it in a different way, in a more rough and tough JDM type style, maybe even make it look a bit like a front wheel drive drift car, I guess. Ugg_Lou asks, if you were to replace the Seicento, what would you replace it with? Now, I've reiterated on a couple of occasions, but I'm going to say it definitively now, the Seicento is going nowhere. That is most likely going to be a forever car that I never ever sell. But if I were to replace it, I know in an instant what I would choose. A Renault Clio 182. It's a car I've always liked, they're good power, they handle well, they're good value for money, and I can afford to get insured in one. So if I was going to replace the Seicento in a heartbeat, it would be with a Renault Clio 182. Elliot Pick asks, since it's a 500 sub special, why don't you go and get an Abarth 500? I can totally see the appeal behind them, and as you'll have seen in various videos I've made over the last few months, I've got a lot of love for Abarth in general. I love the way they look, and I love how awesome they sound. However, an Abarth 500 is light, decently quick, sharp handling, a bit bouncy over the bumps, and fun to drive. Sound familiar? That's right, the reason why I'm not going to buy an Abarth is because it would pretty much lord it over the Seicento. The difference is that an Abarth would cost about 10 times as much to buy, each modification I make would be considerably more expensive, and if I were to keep both of them, the Abarth would dominate the Seicento in terms of performance and quality. If I'm going to get a second car, I want it to be genuinely different to the one I've already got. Harley_Mare_ asks, would you buy a Suzuki SJ, and do you like mine? Well, first of all, Harley, I have to say I've seen some photos of yours and I do like it. I'm a big fan of Suzuki SJs, also known as Samurais, and I think they're a really cool little thing, and it's worth noting that for getting into off-roading, I don't think there's a better choice. However, I wouldn't buy one. They're quite a hard to find car in good condition these days, and because they're a 30-year-old car nearly, they do rot. If I did find a good one that was unmolested, rust-free and stock, I know full well that if I were to buy it, I'd lift it, I'd put mud tyres on it, and that would be another good condition SJ off the road. If I was going to buy a small Suzuki for off-roading, I'd buy one that's a bit newer, less prone to rust, and that there are plenty of, so I wouldn't feel bad about taking a classic off the road. I'd either buy a Vitara or a Jimny, but that said, I'm a big SJ fan, and I love yours. Next, it's on to the only question from Twitter, because for some reason, most of you don't seem to follow me on Twitter, so go do that, at Miller_Corner. At The Real Phil Bull asks, are there any plans to do any track days with the Super Seicento? Absolutely there are. I definitely want to get some more track driving experience, and my car might be the perfect car to do it in, particularly when it's rocking some more power, because it will handle well, stop well, won't be too fast, but it'll be fast enough to keep up with track day traffic, and it means that it's not rear wheel drive and I won't end up spinning and putting it in a crash barrier like most people with E36s and MX-5s seem to do on their very first track days. I really want to get some track driving experience with the little beast, but first I want to get the build a little bit closer to finished to make it as capable and as usable as possible when I do hit the track. Next is on to the questions from my Facebook page, which if you don't already follow is facebook.com/MillerCorner. And first up, Ellis Bramley asks a very good question. If you were to go on a week-long road trip across Europe, which celebrity would you take with you and which car would you choose? And I've spent a lot of time mulling this over. I know which celebrity I'd take though, with without a shadow of doubt, it would be Rowan Atkinson, better known as Mr. Bean to some of you, but why would you not? He's hilariously funny, he's really interesting, he's very clever, he can drive well, and he knows about and likes cars, the perfect road trip companion. As for the car I take, I've got two choices because I couldn't really narrow it down. I knew that you wanted something fast and fun to drive obviously, but also something that would be usable enough on a motorway and big enough that you could put all your luggage in for staying in hotels and stuff. Frankly though, I just cannot narrow it down between these two, so I'm going to have to be a little bit greedy and say either or. My first choice would be the FK8 Honda Civic Type R because, as I've said before, I absolutely love that thing and it's my favourite hot hatch on the market right now. It also drives really well and it's quick, and being a Civic, it's very practical, so that might well be the perfect car for the job. It does look a little bit Asbo and I'm not so sure Rowan Atkinson would be a fan, so my second choice would be something a little bit more subtle, namely the Audi RS3 Saloon, a car which I've always had an interest for since it came out and I truly believe would be a brilliant car for the trip. Fast, sharp handling, practical, and subtle enough to slide under the radar. Next up, Andy Noble asks, what made you get a Seicento as your first car? And also, if you hadn't got a Seicento, what else would you have got? Well, Andy, I've answered the first one a couple of times now, but to reiterate, I liked it and it was cheap to insure. If I hadn't got a Seicento, to be perfectly honest with you, it probably would have been something a bit less interesting because, as I said, I was working in fast food at the time and I didn't have a great deal of money to buy the car or to insure it. I probably would have ended up with something just the cheapest to buy and cheapest to insure. The car that I was right on the cusp of buying was a 1 litre Mark I Skoda Fabia. Not an interesting car, I know, but had the Seicento not come into the equation, that's probably the car I would have ended up with on account of it being the cheapest to insure of any of the cars I got quotes for and had the budget to afford. Next up, we've got not one, not two, but 3 questions from one of my viewers in Canada. That's Cody Dagley. Now Cody, I'm very sorry if I mispronounced your surname there. He asks, first of all, are you any closer to finding a definitive second project car? I'll be honest with you, no. Because every single day my mind changes as to what I want. Sometimes I want a 350Z, sometimes I want an MX-5, sometimes I want an E36, sometimes I want something totally off the wall and different. Frankly, I am no closer. Next, Cody asks, would you ever consider owning a classic car? And the truthful answer to that is probably not really, because my opinion of classic cars is that they're really nice to look at and they're a great way to learn how cars have evolved over the years, but the fact of the matter is that most of them rust, break down frequently, and are far too expensive to consider taking out on a regular basis for fear of crashing them and not being able to replace the parts, and if you do, it's then not original anymore and it lowers the value of them. There are 2 exceptions to my rule though. The first is the original Fiat 500. As most of you know, I've already got an affinity with the Fiat brand and I think they're a really cool, really classy and fairly inexpensive way to get into classic car ownership. I'm not saying I'm going to buy one, but if one comes up at the right price in good condition that's right-hand drive, I know I'd be sorely tempted. The next is the Citroen DS, which I genuinely believe might well be one of the best looking and coolest cars of all time. I absolutely love the way the DS looks and I'm told they ride like no other car. They're one of the most relaxing driving experiences you'll ever have. The only problem with that is there aren't a great deal of right-hand drive DSs left in this country, and those that are upwards of £20,000. So if I did want a DS, I'd either have to stump up a lot of money for a right-hand drive one or see about importing a left-hand drive one, which would mean then driving with the steering wheel on the wrong side of the car for the UK and obviously all the complications of importing a car. And frankly, if I wanted to go through all that, I'd much rather import something cool from Japan. Next, Cody asks, any plan to do any long distance road trip videos? And the answer to that is it's another one I'm going to keep close to my chest, because there are plans afoot to get some really awesome, really long road trips into Europe this year, but I don't want to promise anything in case any of it doesn't come off, and obviously I don't want to give away spoilers, but stay tuned, one way or another, there will be a road trip video this year. Cody's 4th and final question, because I apparently can't count, is what are your favourite car brands? And I think that's a very good question, because most car people will say, oh, I've got no bias, I like all cars. But the fact of the matter is, there are still certain brands that really get our pulses going, whether we admit it or not. I've got 4 manufacturers that I particularly like the work of. The first is Fiat, specifically the 90s era of Fiat, because back then they were making the Cinquecento and Seicento, which I've obviously got a lot of love for. There's the wacky left-hand drive Barchetta Roadster, the Fiat Coupe Turbo, which looks awesome and is stupidly fast, the quirky Panda. There were so many cool cars coming from Fiat in the 90s, and truthfully, if I had the space, the time and the money to own all of them, I think I would. Next is a derivative, a Bath, because the fact of the matter is, you could argue it's kind of Fiat as well, but the fact of the matter is, they're a racing team, so I'm counting them as a separate manufacturer, because they might only make 2 cars technically these days, the Abarth 500 and its derivatives, and the 124, but I love both of them, and I genuinely get excited when I see them, and more importantly, hear them. Abarth have got an epic racing history, and as for what they're doing these days, I would own any of the cars they make. Next is a fairly obvious one, and that's Ferrari. I've had a long-term passion for Ferrari, particularly the 360, as it's my dream car, and you will have noticed in the background in most of my videos I've got Ferrari posters on my bedroom walls as well. That is how much I love Ferrari and their cars. I'm not one of these people that thinks Ferrari can do no wrong, because I know they can, but just look at some of their current model lineup. The insane 812 Superfast, the amazing 488, and the astonishing GTC for Lusso. And as we all know, because they're doing badly in Formula 1, their road cars are incredible right now, so long may Ferrari keep losing in Formula 1. But my final favourite car company is one that I've had kind of a more recent obsession with. As you will be able to tell by last week's video, it's Lotus. Now previously I had a bit of a passing interest in their cars, but I never really properly looked into any of them. But having got up close and personal with some of them on the Stratton Open Day, I am now obsessed with Lotus, particularly a certain Evora that there's an upcoming video on. In fact, when I came back from that Stratton Day, I jumped straight on the internet to try and find a Lotus that I could afford to buy and insure, and the answer to that was pretty much none of them. I am obsessed with their cars at the moment. I think they all look awesome, they obviously drive incredibly well, and they are super underrated. So my final favourite car maker is without a doubt Lotus. So there you have it. You asked and I answered. That was the 500 subs Q&A special. Now I want to give a massive thank you to everyone on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube that took the time to submit a question for this video, because without you, obviously there wouldn't have been any questions to answer and there wouldn't have been a video. But on a much grander scale, I want to thank each and every one of you for watching, subscribing and supporting me and my channel, because without you I wouldn't have grown to this point and I wouldn't be continuing to grow day by day. I could not be more grateful for everything that you people do, commenting, subscribing, sharing my videos and liking on a regular basis, because the more that you guys do, the better I get promoted and the more likely my videos are to get discovered. Growing on YouTube is becoming increasingly hard at the moment, what with people getting demonetized left, right and centre, and smaller YouTubers becoming less and less likely to show up in recommended videos and in search results. It can be really hard to grow your channel if you're just starting out. But with all the help that you lovely people are providing, watching, commenting, subscribing and sharing my videos, I'm gradually getting there and getting more and more recognition, and I simply could not be more grateful for it. Thank you so much to everyone who supports the channel, because without you I wouldn't be at 500 subscribers and I wouldn't be growing at the rate I am. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything you do for me and for the channel. We've made it to 500 subs, people. Next up, we're gunning for 1,000. Thanks so much for watching the video, everybody. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a big old thumbs up and also subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you are notified when a new Miller Corner video is released. There's so much to come and I cannot wait. But for now, thanks once again for watching, everybody, and have a brilliant rest of your day. See you soon and have a good one.